Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we're talking about the latest movie from the director of Babe, Pig in the City, Happy Feet, and how could we forget Lorenzo's Oil. He's often been called a madman. He's also friends with Hideo Kojima and maybe going to appear in Death Stranding 2 as a main character. That's right! I'm talking, of course, about George Miller, the director of the film Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. So as always, we're going to start with an icebreaker question before jumping into a spoiler-free review of the film where we'll provide a verdict, and then we'll conclude the show with an in-depth spoiler discussion. And joining me today, recording this on Memorial Day, listeners, sacrificing a slice of their holiday to talk about all things on the glorious Fury Road, my co-host, an award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker. He's lived, he's died, and now he's back alive again. Laron Chapman, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Caleb, you're all the barbecue and watermelon that I need for today. So thank you. Thank you for this. This is my meal right here.
Oh my gosh. That's the best compliment you could pay me, Laron. You're gonna, given this movie, you're actually going to be literally eating me by the time this podcast is over. The resources are going to be running pretty thin. Yeah. So
Human blood sausage.
That's right, listeners. We're also rejoined by GoodTrash Genrecast co-host from GoodTrash Media, Dalton Stuart. Dalton, the war boy. Welcome back to the show.
I got a lot of sun out in the wasteland this weekend, Caleb. I'm sleepy, but I'm trying to get gassed up, full of gasoline, ready to talk about this buck wild ass movie.
I've got some spray for you, the chrome spray. We can give you some.
Well, I was spitting piss into my radiator all the way here, so I definitely flew with the angels to be here with you.
I can't wait to see the audition tapes from Piss Boy.
Truly. Incredible stuff.
And also, every movie after this, he's like, all right, so what have you done before? I was Piss Boy in Furious.
Yeah. Incredible stuff.
Well, hey, listeners, a couple of really cool announcements before we get into today's review of what is my personal, between this and Dune Part 2, this was my movie of the summer. This was my most anticipated movie of the year, right up there with Dune. This is the biggest one this summer. Been super pumped to talk about it. But first, hey, this is our last normal episode before our annual Dead Center Film Festival coverage is kicking off, because that's right, ladies and gentlemen, Oklahoma's biggest film festival is right around the corner, June 6th through the 9th. Tickets are on sale at deadcenterfilm.org. And as in the last several years, we are thrilled here at the Cinematropolis and the Cinematic Schematic to return as an official media partner for this year's festival to inspire, promote, and celebrate creativity and community here in Oklahoma at Dead Center. So what's that going to look like for those of you who tune in on the regular? So as in previous years, we have an amazing team of writers who are going to be covering all sorts of documentaries, narrative features, and short films published all exclusively at the cinematropolis.com. That's going to be Joe Light. That's going to be Daniel Bokemper. That's going to be Christopher Schultz. As always, they're always there on the ground, always covering tons of movies. You won't want to miss any of their written work there. Additionally, the Cinematic Schematic will be talking with filmmakers from Oklahoma and also a few nationwide, and we're actually going to be kicking off our coverage with a crossover episode of the Dead Center podcast, and that's going to publish on Monday, June 3rd, and then we'll continue publishing episodes all the way through June 14th, and we'll conclude our coverage with a recap episode as in years past. First up, our preview episode is going to feature a panel of the programmers, including our own Laron Chapman, who will talk about some of the cool stuff you can expect to see at the festival. And hey, did I mention you should go to deadcenterfilm.org and buy your pass today? So from there, it's always a sprint. So we're going to be taking a little break starting after Dead Center coverage until mid-July. We're going to return with a review of Maxine, one of my most anticipated movies of the summer, Twisters, because we're an Oklahoma-based podcast and we have no choice, and Deadpool and Wolverine, because God, guys, I can be superhero fatigued for all day long.
Watch Twisters just smash it. Watch it just be
I actually am kind of hoping.
Watch it be like this runaway summer success. I don't see it happening, but I'm just saying, if it did, that would just be,
I mean, I'm obligated to discuss the highest grossing film at the domestic box office on GoodTrash. That's how we close out each year. So I am, fingers crossed, hoping it's Dune or Twisters I get to talk about, and not
Yeah.
My old friend, the chimichanga eater.
Well, actually, Dalton, I think there's something a lot worse than the chimichanga eater, and that is the most frightening thing that I have to think about this summer, and that is, of course, it's Despicable Me 4, because those minions haunt me.
Yeah.
Ugh, I actually think that's going to be the top grossing movie of the year.
Oh no!
I think I would rather catch up on the Despicable Me movies. I truly, if I've gotten to my head at this point in my life, I think I'd rather spend my time with Gru and children.
Well, I'm gonna rebut that because, as I was saying, I might be super tired of superheroes, and trust me, I am. But I also just finished watching X-Men '97 a couple weeks ago, and that, my friends, that is how you do comic books. Best thing Marvel's made since Endgame. Top 5 things they've made throughout the entire. It's not MCU, but since they created the MCU, one of the best things by a lot. And Deadpool and Wolverine, it's X-Men. I'm there. I just want it to be good.
Yeah.
Oh, it's got Hugh Jackman. It's still the X-Men. Yeah. So, Laron, you and I have a shared love for X-Men.
We do. We have that is my one exception where it's like I will watch every X-Men, even if they're bad. I will watch every X-Men. Yeah,
it's true. I own all of them.
Blade and X-Men.
Yeah,
and then Batman. But it's
DC.
Those are the 3 characters in the superhero universe where any iteration of it I will watch. Outside of that, I'll show up to them, but I'll probably do it begrudgingly.
yeah, more and more begrudgingly with each release. But I will say, Laron, I do own every X-Men movie on physical media except for Dark Phoenix, and it's only because I think I just forgot that it existed. Like if I saw it on a store shelf, I would be like, oh yeah, I don't have this, and I would buy it immediately.
Yeah,
everyone,
complete the collection,
including Origins. Hey, we might talk more about Origins here in 1 second, but with that said, let's break the ice as we always do by talking a little bit about prequels. Okay, so Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, is I would say direct prequel to 2015's Mad Max Fury Road. We're going to get into it in the review. It's a lot different than Fury Road, which really made me think, well, what is it that makes a great prequel? What is it that makes a good one? So I thought we have a couple questions around prequels, but I just wanted to ask you guys, Dalton, Laron, listeners, can email us at cinematropolis@gmail.com. What makes a great prequel movie? And I'll start with you, Dalton Stuart.
I think you want something that deepens the original text while standing on its own, right? I mean, the inherent problem with the prequel is there's a lack of stakes because of your not preconceived, but rather the knowledge you have going into the experience sort of robs it of some amount of stakes, just as far as like characters that are going to make it to the next story. Mm-hmm. So it's also just hard, I think, for these kinds of stories to exist without, being obliged to set up stuff from the film they're a prequel to. So that's ultimately what you want is something that is able to stand on its own while sort of adding to that other text. And the examples I've thought of that I like, I think I'll manage to do that. But it's a short list. I think it's truly
a difficult thing to accomplish.
I was going to say a fool's errand, but that seems a little more intense than I want to be on this particular point. But I definitely, as you said, Laron, it's tough, and I definitely anybody that undertakes one out of passion. I guess that's the other thing. So many of these are born out of franchise obligation. That desire for another sure thing product. So that I guess that kind of makes them frustrating, right?
Yeah,
their existence. But I definitely, and we'll get into this more, I'm sure, when we get into Furiosa specifically. But in this particular case of today's film, I do think I can at the very least see why George Miller was so intent on also making this film, and in some versions along the way, like it considered making this before making Fury Road. So I definitely think this checks the boxes that we're looking for. Just to tip my hand a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And again, we're going to get more into it with Furiosa, but it's important to note with Furiosa and Fury Road, and there was actually a third film called The Wasteland. All the 3 of those scripts were written at the same time, well, roughly in the same period, and they opted to go with Fury Road first. So it's a little different than, say, Rogue One.
Yeah.
Or Solo, a Star Wars story, where it's like, hey, people love Star Wars. What how did Han Solo get that blasters?
It explains why so much of the DNA from Fury Road still feels baked into this one, even if it is diverting a little bit structurally, narratively. But
Laron, what about you? Anything you want to add about what makes a great prequel?
Yeah, I echo what Dalton said. I think anything that can recontextualize and expand the world that we already know, or in retrospect make the film we have already seen better. That's the difficult feat. Again, short list of films that I think have done that. But I think it has to deepen the story that we already know. Otherwise, it does just kind of it feels like a milking of the IP sort of scenario, which I think is definitely the studio incentive. But occasionally, you can have both. Things can happen at the same time. So, but yeah, I think if it in retrospect makes you look at the material, if it makes you love something more than you walked out with, then that's great. That's good, but that's rare.
It is very rare, and I think going back to the IPification thing, and this is the one thing I want to add here is. Here's how there's a lot of ways to do a prequel wrong, and there's far fewer ways to do it right. And I don't even think the right way is necessarily always a definitively right way. This works for certain viewers because that's what they like about the original movie, for example. So here's the thing that always bothers me about prequels, and a thing that anytime these days a prequel is announced, I just kind of roll my eyes. I'm like, okay. Answering questions that absolutely no one asked. So, for example, how did Han meet Chewie? How did he get that blaster? How did he win the Falcon? It's like, if it feels like a Wikipedia article, it's probably not, doesn't have a strong reason to exist. You can just go read lore elsewhere, right? You also have stuff like X-Men Origins Wolverine that's actually just a bad movie. It is also a terrible prequel because it makes the future films worse, which again is a thing that prequels always run the risk of doing, is robbing the better thing of value because of how bad the explanation is. Famously, I don't necessarily agree with this, but famously, a lot of people don't like the Phantom Menace, Star Wars The Phantom Menace, because of the midichlorians thing, because they felt like it took away from the Force. I'm going to stay neutral on that topic right now because it's not a Star Wars podcast, but that is a thing you see. Oh, I didn't really want to know. Why is this a thing? Exorcist Beginning, and Laron, you could actually chime into this because I haven't seen the movie. But from what I'm hearing, The Strangers Chapter 1, just rehashing. It's not even an original story. It's literally, we're going to rehash the greatest hits from the thing
Yeah, just add nothing new to it. You'll be there by name recognition alone. Forgets every reason why that first one was even remotely successful. So yeah, that's also a bad thing. But also like tacking on sequelitis that also can do. You can strain an IP. Like it used to be great, and now you're, go out on top is what I say. If you don't have anything new to say, don't do it. But that is not how money works, and that's not how studios work. So
the one thing I want to add, because I think you guys already hit on all the world buildings, both the positives and the risks there, is it really needs to be able to stand on its own as a movie. Like that's really the most important thing.
Yeah,
it needs its own story. Thing. Does it in some way enhance the thing you had before? Yeah, sure. But if it doesn't stand off its own, if you can't watch the movie as someone who hasn't seen the other thing meaningfully, then it's not good. Yeah. Maybe to kind of clarify for listeners, I could rag on. We could name the bad prequels all day. I've done a couple. What are three of our favorite prequels? I picked three just to kind of put a cap on it. And it turns out we all agree that there's not really that many great prequels. So Laron, I'll start with you.
I'm really curious to guess yours. I'm just going to throw a few out there. We'll come back to you later. But I feel like Prometheus should be on there for you. And I feel like a certain Predator movie that came out recently is on there for you. But those are the two that I would guess for you.
Those are great guesses, man.
Great guesses. Okay, cool.
Great guesses. Stone Rock. Don't respond.
Well, Prey is one of mine. I will say that. I just think that that's an example where even when they said we were making it, I was like, we've had so many sequels to this. Some okay, fun pieces of popcorn entertainment, but I felt like it's like one of the best entries in that franchise, in that world.
Oh,
They found a new way again to recontextualize the material and make it very impactful, and still telling a very interesting native story as well. So Prey is on my list. One also that it's on my list is Pearl.
Yes.
Here's an example where like I had a fun time with X more than a lot of people did, I think, and it was just a fun throwback slasher 70s movie, but Pearl in context with it makes me love this universe more. You know what I mean? Because now I'm invested in this particular character, and this particular actress is playing this character. And so I felt like Pearl was a great example of a prequel done right, where I think it's actually better than X, and it makes me like X more.
Well, I love that's a great example too, because that's actually like the genre is basically different. Like, it's horror adjacent, but it's really not doing a slasher film, right?
Like a Douglas Sirk movie with some blood splattered on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it feels like a 20s, 30s Hollywood sweeping, at least it's mimicking that kind of style, and then goes ham towards the end. So, but then Mia Goth gets to run wild and be great. So, and then one that I recently saw is The First Omen. This is something I
keep hearing this kind of rocks.
I have been saying I don't know why this is a good movie. If you had told me this was going to be better than Immaculate, I would probably spit in your face, and say not my Sydney Sweeney, but
the one who did Madam Web?
Right. Well, as the year went on, I started realizing my argument wasn't that strong about for her. But
she's great. She's a treasure. I love her.
Great. Yeah. But no, The First Omen for me, a surprising, not cash grab, adds to the world building, makes a franchise that I'm not even that crazy about. The Omen, I like the original, I guess, but it's not one I hold like Halloween or Scream or any of those. So, but this is just a great standalone, like singular story that can exist on its own, but also adds new context to the events leading up to the first one. And it's just an actually great atmosphere, very spooky time. So those are three, and all those again, very recent.
Very recent.
So
yeah. So to recap, that is Prey, Pearl, and The First Omen. The First Omen, which you can read Laron's full take on at thecinemetropolis.com on his Real Insights with Laron column, cinemetropolis.com. Dalton, Stuart, what are your three favorite prequels?
Well, let's get this one out of the way. I also have Prey on my list.
Oh man, okay. I gotta confess, I also have Prey on my
list.
Let's
just get
yeah.
Come on, it just whips. It's still like this very interesting action movie that explores gender, much like the first one, and is doing it in a way different way. Again, like only kind of builds on what was already there, but again stands on its own. Has a unique look that pays homage to the look of the original. Kind of messes with you and your expectations based on your knowledge of the original. It just really is doing everything you want out of that kind of story. And again, as Laron said, we have so few sort of Hollywood movies that center the indigenous perspective, and even if it's an action horror movie about the most dangerous game but make it an alien, still pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
There's something undeniable about watching French fur trappers get absolutely bodied in an extended tracking shot. Just really satisfying stuff.
Seeing the colonizers try to use old school pistols on the Predator, pretty priceless.
And then again, like with the Predator, as the sort of alien force, with superior firepower, like that only adds to like
the content, the subtext.
The subtext, both in the original Predator, where we've sort of got America's interventionism in Central America, and then again in Prey, where we have the colonization of North America sort of standing in for this like sort of larger thematic subtext going on with the damn cool alien with a mask and a laser cannon and stuff. It's just good stuff. Another recent one, as Laron sort of tipped to, this is kind of feels like something we've only recently gotten the hang of, as far as like doing prequels that are
substantive.
Yeah, substantive. Yeah, exactly. But Godzilla Minus One from
Yes,
this year or last year?
Last year.
I think it's already the last year now. Yeah. But that was, wow, what a picture.
Incredible.
Yeah, really just enjoyed that movie. Think about it often.
The second it's available to stream in the US, we're going to have an emergency episode of the podcast because it was that movie that just kind of came in really late in the game, but everyone was blown away.
Really incredible stuff.
Like Godzilla. Yes, came out of nowhere.
If you're listening to a movie podcast, there's a good chance you caught this one last year, so we won't belabor the point. But I wanna get to my weird one.
Do it.
My weird one is a made-for-TV movie from 1990 starring Anthony Perkins called Psycho 4: The Beginning, which has got, as podcasters,
this is a hot take,
as podcasters, this one appeals to me because I think it's about Anthony Perkins as, oh my God, I can't think of his character name in Psycho. Wow.
Anthony
Bates.
Perkins is Norman Bates.
Norman Bates. There we go. It's about Norman Bates, who has been released on his own recognizance from a mental ward and is living a mild-mannered life. But he's about to have a child and is worried that his child will have hereditarily picked up his penchant for murder. So he calls into a radio show and gives his origin story. It's something I saw, and I can't remember if it was AMC or Sci-Fi, but it was something that would run on cable a lot when I was a kid, and I just always found it. I had a relationship with the original Psycho, even early on, so it was just a film that I was always interested in, because it was from the 90s, animated for TV movie. It was kind of salacious and gets into sort of the psychosexual stuff going on with Norman Bates a little bit more. Just a weird little object of a film that I've always been fascinated by.
I've only seen it once, and now you convinced me to rewatch it. It's been so long. I mean,
is it available anywhere?
I don't even remember. What I thought of it at the time.
Yeah,
but hearing the joy that it brought you makes me think I might appreciate it in today's.
It just really,
I wasn't a podcaster then either. So,
exactly, and I haven't seen it as an adult. Truly, I haven't seen it since those childhood watches. But I was going through the list of, prequels and just trying to find ones that spoke to me. I was like, oh yeah, what a weird little movie. And of course, it being a sort of odd psychosexual story about the radio and being confessional, all of that, really appealed to my sensibilities as a kid. So yeah, I think there's an odd and interesting movie in there.
I'm disappointed this isn't Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again.
Yeah.
But, when you said weird, I was like, where's he going?
Yeah.
Where's he going? But I can respect that one.
Oh, yeah. Well, what about you, Caleb? Other than Prey, which you obviously, I mean, come on, what are you going to
Well, I'll say I had backups prepared, but I also had Pearl on my list as my number 2. So I'm gonna knock that one off.
Just solidifies that it is.
And it is kind of incredible. That movie is a masterwork, and it's way better than it has any right to be for what it is. Ty West is like, hey, I can make 2 movies for the price of one, and makes this totally different genre. Anyway, check it out. Pearl, worth your time. Can't wait for Maxime. Laron, you got to get a read on me. I guess if you package Prometheus with Alien Covenant, you have me picked.
Okay.
But Alien Covenant, I know, is a sequel to Prometheus, but I feel like it takes everything about Prometheus I loved to the next phase, which is where it gets really weird. Dalton, you and I saw this together, by the way.
We
you remember?
did, yeah.
And it really stuck in my brain. It's the weird, it's all the Michael Fassbender David stuff, and then the way they kind of put it in this weird castle in space, and it feels like you're in a Frankenstein or movie at times.
I remember they ramped up the Michael Fassbender character in this one, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
That one, there's 2 of them.
That one just evaporated from my memory, so I don't remember.
That's most people.
I remember seeing it, but I've seen Prometheus several times, and I've seen that once in theaters. So
Catherine Waterston and Danny McBride, cool final girls.
Exactly. Didn't see it coming either.
Yeah.
I guess, and he did also co-wrote the script, I think. Danny McBride had a writing credit on it, I'm pretty sure.
He's working.
I'm writing down Psycho 4.
An Alien Covenant.
An Alien Covenant.
Good.
And listen,
we're always looking for content to watch at home.
Here's the thing, and maybe it's just where I was at the time, but, it's technically a prequel, and it actually does all the things you'd expect in an Alien movie in the first third, and then the second and the last 2 acts is when it gets just batshit weird, and that's what I was there
Just
for.
a lot of you asking yourself, is Michael Fassbender about to kiss Michael Fassbender?
A lot of that.
Yeah, a lot of that.
But yeah, I really enjoy that movie. So I'd package them together. That's kind of a cheat, but that's two movies. And I also do, in fact, love Prometheus. The haters can just bug off and watch it again. All right, and then man, I'm struggling with this last one because the right, correct film person answer is, of course, The Godfather Part 2, which is, it's a sequel, but it's also a prequel, or it's a sequel that fills in, at least half the movies feels like it's also a prequel. So I'm going to throw that out there. It kind of qualifies.
I think it counts.
Yeah. So, I mean, it is good. I just, it does need to be acknowledged. It's not really my pick. My pick would probably be... I actually think Revenge of the Sith is a great movie that has a lot of weaknesses, but as a prequel, functionally, it has all the stuff I want. Just unfortunately, the script is very bad. Very specifically, the writing is bad. I like the dialogue, but I love the spectacle. I love the tragedy. I think it does prequels well because we all know that Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader, but that's not really where the tension is. The tension is, how's this going to go down, and who's going to kind of come out of this not well, because there's a lot of questions there, which is another thing I think prequels do well. So I'll throw Revenge of the Sith out there. You could also say the Planet of the Apes trilogy that we just covered in our most recent episode.
I'm going to give an honorable mention to Red Dragon. I find that to be an underrated film in the Hannibal Lecter, universe, And then recently Saw X, I thought was actually a really interesting, definitely changes everything from Saul's not very deep, let's just be real, but it adds some substance to
some context
and substance to who Jigsaw is and why he is, and and something we didn't even have to care about.
I mean, I'm a big Saw fan back in the day, but I was rolling my eyes. I was like, oh no, don't do it again. And it was actually pretty good.
It was strange to spend 45 minutes of that movie being like, yeah, I'm on Jigsaw's side here. I don't like these people. They actually deserve this.
Well, you know what? Okay, so the last thing, I didn't mention this before, but I think it's worth noting about a good prequel if you're going to do it in an established franchise, and I think this is a common thread amongst definitely Prey, is it's not trying to actually be functionally a prequel. It's just telling a story in that universe that's really, really well, that has a lot of thematic overlap with the original. So it feels like a Predator movie. It just happens to take place before. Like I said, it doesn't have all this connective tissue about, oh, well, this is how this happened. And I think Saw X actually also does that remarkably well, surprisingly. It's just, hey, here's a story. It's set in the continuity. It takes place before, but it's not setting anything up, really.
Where are you at with Alien Romulus? Speaking of prequels and alien films.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the director did a great job with Evil Dead, Fede Alvarez. I mean,
excited, trepidation, but just excited. Same.
I'm always going to be a little sad we never got the third Ridley Scott Alien movie with Michael Fassbender. That's always going to sting. But Fede Alvarez seems like a worthy successor to take that to the reins. And I mean, not that I really, honestly, I know he's a great director, but Ridley Scott's wrong often. But he has been hyping it up, like in terms of the press, talking about how great it looks.
An appropriately drippy teaser trailer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm on the Kaylee Spaney train right now. I'm not like obsessed with her yet, but I'm liking what she's putting out there, at least the movies she's been affiliated with. So
that's right. I forgot she's in Romulus. Good cast on that. Truly.
It's a very good cast.
So I think that might be,
it's one we'll talk about on this podcast. I'll tell you that. I'm definitely making some airtime for it.
Good.
And this is not a movie, and I will move on, but I just have to give a shout out to the series Better Call Saul, which is technically a prequel to Breaking Bad. And that is an incredible example of a show that enhances everything that came before it, but also tells its own story that thematically brings the whole universe full circle for me personally. And that's a hard thing to do, especially on TV.
That show didn't go home with enough hardwire. I just I was like, this is the year to do it.
They never did it.
They didn't do it.
You know, it actually has set a record for the most Emmy nominations of any show of all time. It also notoriously won 0 of those nominations.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah, it's a bummer. All right, with that said, let's move on to our spoiler-free review of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga.
Furiosa! We've come too far. Furiosa! They took Furiosa!
As a child, my world was forever changed. My mother was magnificent. And he took it all from me.
Who do we have here?
She's from a place of abundance. This is our destiny.
My childhood, my mother, I want them back.
So according to IMDb, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, is described as the origin story of renegade warrior Furiosa before her encounter and team up with Mad Max. Had to get the Mad Max in there for branding somehow. This is the 5th movie set in the Mad Max universe following the original 1979 film, the 1982 sequel, The Road Warrior, the 3rd film, Beyond Thunderdome, which was released in 1985, and then, of course, 2015's Mad Max Fury Road. This is Furiosa is a direct prequel, as we said earlier, to Fury Road. And I've already noted how this was, unlike a lot of prequels where the prequel is derivative after the fact of something successful, this was a part of sort of like a trilogy of movies that Miller wanted to make. This film was budgeted an estimated $168 million and opened to a relatively, pretty disappointing $58.9 million worldwide during its opening weekend. Its opening weekend, which was the lowest Memorial Day weekend in 30 years. You heard that. Yeah. So everyone out there.
That's so depressing.
I just can't tell you. I'm not here to hate anyone. This was a holiday weekend. We all got things going on.
Where were you?
But I know the Fury Road fit heads are out there. I've talked to several of them. They're like, yeah, I love it. And I was like, you gonna see Furiosa? And they're like, man, maybe I might wait till it comes on DVD. And I'm like, no. The movie needs you. Seriously. Yeah. The film stars Anya Taylor Joy. Another, Laron, correction, I'm working on the names, corrections, mispronounced. It's Anya Taylor Joy, according to the internet, as Furiosa, Chris Hemsworth as Dementus, Tom Burke as Praetorian Jack, Lackley Hume as Immortan Joe, who recast the original actor who sadly passed away in 2020. And this film, unlike Fury Road, which takes place over the course of, I think it's like 3 days and 2 nights, or 2 nights and 3 days, something along those lines. This takes place over the course of 15 years. With that said, as much as we've rained praise upon Fury Road on this podcast, the Cinematic Schematic, over the years, I don't know that we've had a deep dive into the franchise. So maybe listeners, you want to know, what is our relationship with this franchise that goes back to 1979? So Dalton, Stuart, I'll start with you. What is your relationship with Mad Max?
Yeah, I first checked out the Mad Max films when I was, a little fancied myself a burgeoning little cinephile and was sort of going through the prerequisite, trilogies and franchises that, a little dipshit getting into movies is supposed to watch. Of the 3 was really only taken with The Road Warrior. Somebody actually gave me Beyond Thunderdome on DVD when I was a kid. I think that was actually the first one I tried to watch, and I still have not seen that film all the way start to finish, believe it or not. That's a movie I've seen the first 45 minutes of, I think, and I've never gone back to. But my first visit with The Road Warrior rocked my socks off, and I don't think I've seen it again since then. And then I was, I think the original Mad Max is like a really interesting, and gripping, DIY indie film. It's very impressive what they were able to accomplish. But Fury Road just sort of stands alone, totemic in its audacity. It is one of my favorite movies. It's on my top 100. I think it's in the top 10. I think it's the highest rated action movie on my top 100, just behind my number 1. If you don't count my number 1, The Matrix, it is the next highest rated action film. So yeah, I have a great deal of affection for Fury Road, which I think takes everything that's interesting about those first 3 movies and sort of synthesizes it into, this kind of thesis statement on Western civilization, late stage capitalism, the climate crisis, Just truly like
A patriarchy.
a film that is about fucking everything without having, more
Just spell
than
it out.
15 minutes of dialogue, 20 minutes of dialogue in a 2-hour movie. Yeah, it's just an incredible achievement in filmmaking. And I do like those other films, and I had hoped to revisit them in the run up to Furiosa. I just didn't have time.
A lot of movies.
Yeah, a lot of movies. But yeah, I'm a huge lover of Fury Road, and definitely have been wanting to get around to finally watching all of Thunderdome and rewatching Road Warrior. Weirdly, the first one I think I've seen like 2 or 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Other than Fury Road, I think it's the only one I've rewatched. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to going back in on this series, especially coming off of Furiosa, which I like a lot.
All right. Well, more on that in a moment. Don't worry, Dalton. I understand exactly why you took that break and beyond the Thunderdome. A lot of good stuff at the end, but man, that second act is slow and weird. Laron Chapman, what is your relationship to the franchise?
So I came to it very late, kind of riding off the high of Fury Road, just wanted to go into that world a little deeper, realized there were more movies, knew of their existence, never watched them. And so I would say probably in 2015, 2016, when Fury Road came out, did a deep dive and watched them all. So I don't have a strong connection to any of them, but and we'll do a ranking here later. But I agree also that Road Warrior was really the only one of the core 3, you know what I mean, that I responded to enough to like, okay, this I hold this one in my mind, There is some slaptastic things in Thunderdome that I do appreciate, and
Chainsaw fight, pretty cool.
Yeah,
I mean, the titular Thunderdome sequence is pretty
it's
fun.
pretty cool. There are things to admire about it. I don't think it holds together as a whole thing. Even just just the vision for it isn't quite as sharp as it is. I think it is in other ones. But then Tina Turner, I'm just in anything. She's just rocks. So it was just cool to see her in a genre film. It's just really cool. So I don't have a strong relationship with any of them, but except Road Warrior. And that one holds up. And I think that in retrospect, like you said, like just cumulatively watching all of these, it does make you appreciate how they, again, as Dalton mentioned, synthesized all of these things these disparate parts from all these movies that we do like, the kind of kinetic energy that all of them kind of bring in fits and starts is just ramped up to such a degree in Fury Road, and to a similar extent in Furiosa, so it just seems like they finally figured out the right alchemy of what we need, with this aesthetic in the world and the sound and the vision of it, and it all just kind of comes together very nicely in these modern iterations. So
yeah, I think that's also well said. I think you guys both nailed it. I mean, in terms of me, I was similar to you, Dalton. I was like, I'm getting into movies. I gotta watch the Mad Max franchise. I think it was like in college, so like around 2011, 2012, whenever I started blogging. And I was sure I had seen the first, I was sure I'd seen all of them before Fury Road until I bought the box set that included Fury Road and went back and watched Mad Max 1 and was like, oh, I was thinking of the Road Warrior, and realized I had never seen the original film until I had the box set. So I've seen Road Warrior a few times, thought that was the first movie. Such a noob mistake to make, honestly.
Well, and that's because of how it was released here, right?
Yeah.
It's getting released here as the Road Warrior, and then in Australia it was Mad Max 2, sometimes Mad Max 2, the Road Warrior, right? So just sort of it's always had kind of a weird history internationally, those first 2 movies.
Well, it's weird. The original film, when it came out, made like $100 million in 1979 globally.
Crazy.
Huge hit worldwide, not a hit in the US though, which is bizarre because usually it's the other way around.
Yeah.
But so I kind of circle back to that one. In some ways, I'm kind of glad I saw it that way. So big fan of Road. Sum it up. I think Road Warrior, especially when you think about the budget they were working on in that time frame, the stunt work really shines. And again, similarly to Fury Road, was very bold, had to have been very bold in the 1980s, right? Thunderdome, it's that movie I think is a ton of fun. I love that it's not just trying to do the Road Warrior again, but it's got some big story issues. I think the first 45 minutes to an hour is a blast. Then you've got another like 30 minutes in there right after that where it almost turns into a totally different movie. And then they bring it back at the end with another amazing car chase, which is kind of ironic because it then feels like it's the Road Warrior again at the end, because it kind of goes back to that sort of action sequence. Fury Road is by far one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's my number one movie of the 2010s, just in terms of because it's got everything. It's got everything Dalton said about the layered. It means so much. It has so much to say about so many things that are so prescient to the time we live in without actually having to say anything about them. It's a badass action movie that just moves. It clips pedal to the metal. It's 2 hours long, so it makes it highly rewatchable. And it's a movie that you could actually turn into a silent film and would play just as well. So technically, the movie is firing on all cylinders. So there's just so many things working for it.
I think we watched it with the Chrome,
the black and Chrome, yeah,
black and Chrome version at your old space. Oh man,
yeah, a while ago.
That was a while ago,
a couple houses ago, right? Or back in that old apartment. But it's so anyway, I'm a big fan of the franchise. I wouldn't say they're all hits, but I do think that George Miller's taken some big swings, and I want to bring it back to the original because watching that one after the fact really helped me contextualize the evolution of the series. It feels like kind of like a 70s indie, almost like snuff film. Like it was made for no money, but they still did so much impressive stunt work, especially with the cars. And when you look at it as an actual, having seen the other ones first and you watch it, it really felt like an origin story for this mythological character that you see in 2, 3, and 4. Because by the time we get after the first one, it really becomes less about Max and more about he's this guy wandering the wasteland like a cowboy or a samurai who's just here to help this group, reluctantly help this group who's in trouble. And really, the story isn't about him and any of them after the first one. So I thought that was pretty neat. And I do think Furiosa brings it all together in terms of thinking about what is it that Miller's been working towards with this entire franchise. And it's like folklore. He's created a folklore mythology that feels like epic and sprawling, set in this wasteland. And we weren't. This was the first time I felt like I had the whole picture of like what all is on this canvas, and what are the ideas he's been working through his entire life that have really become extra clear in this movie. So, in a weird way, this is the one that brings it all into focus for me. Even though I think Furiosa is probably the superior film. With that said, what did we think of Furiosa, Mad Max Saga, Laron Chapman?
Yeah, so I had a blast with this movie, and I went into it with pretty high expectations. I mean, but at the same time, knowing full well that this was a movie that was going to be competing with perfection, and I mean, or near perfection at least. You know what I mean? Like, and so, just knowing that those odds were not in the film's favor, I was surprised how closely it does come to, my enjoy. I realized that anything I did enjoy in this one is something I enjoyed in the other one, but it's just that it's operating pretty much at the same level. You know what I mean? When it's firing on all cylinders. So I thought it accomplished a lot technically here. I do appreciate, as you just mentioned, because I think part of the beauty and the genius of Fury Road is that it is such a straightforward story, but in a stealthy way, it's actually about a lot of things, where that structure though, of it being this 2-hour chase scene, you know what I mean, it's kind of bold. It's a bold way to tell a story, you know what I mean? And so I felt like inherently with this being a prequel, you can't really, it can't operate with that same structure this time around. It wouldn't work, And so I felt like that was going to be a feature and a bug here, in that way, because it has to operate this way to tell the story it's trying to tell. But inherently, the narrative momentum is going to be less consistent, because of that narrative structure. So in that way, yeah, it's not as great. But it's about as great of a prequel as I could expect from, this universe. And so I was pretty jazzed with it for the most part.
I like that you highlight too that this really is operating on a totally different, no pun intended, but the gear shift. It's a different gear.
It's telling a different story.
Totally different story.
Yeah.
And it was probably, I agree with you. I think it was probably wise for them to not try to just redo Fury Road. It would have been a fool's errand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in that sense, like Dalton said earlier. Dalton, what did you think of the film?
You said something about how this one especially feels very mythic. And yeah, it feels like a fable that's been sent back from the future. There's this sort of this little line at the end of Fury Road, an on-screen, quote attributed to the first history man or something like that. And then in this film, we sort of get more of like what does that mean? And we sort of have this idea of these history keepers within the wasteland who are sort of the keepers of old world knowledge. And this film, like, definitely more than any other Mad Max film, I think really feels like some sort of artifact from somewhere else, as at least the way the story is structured. I've seen these films, Fury Road and Furiosa, compared to the Iliad and the Odyssey, which I think is sort of an interesting comparison point as far as like one being very straightforward about getting from point A to point B and the hurdles along the way, and the other one kind of being more of a sprawling political narrative. And I think that's fun. And I think connecting these films to those kind of classic epics makes a lot of sense because of these films sort of existing in an epic filmmaking tradition, especially Fury Road, and I mean, this one being more expensive than Fury Road. I mean, especially these two being sort of modern, hyper expensive blockbusters in ways those original three films were not. I definitely, it just like, it's Miller really tripling down on his worldview, on sort of his aesthetic for the world, on sort of his conception of how this post-apocalypse works and how the collapse of society sort of brings out the worst elements that exist within modern society already. Yeah, it's interesting how this film is so much talkier, and yet still manages to have a lot of the same subtext as Fury Road while kind of expanding on things and you know, the things that in Fury Road are sort of larger concepts and ideas are kind of grounded in character in Furiosa in a much more embodied way.
That's a good observation.
Yeah. And short of that, failing all of these smarty pants things I've said, it fucking bangs wangs.
Absolutely.
So cool, dude. It's so cool. There's guys parasailing behind dirt bikes.
The giant propeller fans on their backs.
Well,
Oh, man.
and it's interesting, like, this is the third big rig chase in the Mad Max franchise, right? Obviously, all of Fury Road is kind of a big rig chase, and there's a famous big rig chase in Road Warrior. So obviously, this is a set piece that Miller has returned to a couple of times, but I think every time he's iterating and reinventing and finding a new way to sort of
new variables.
New ways to do this sort of like pirate ship combat
Right.
on dirt roads. It's just so thrilling to watch, truly.
Well, I love it though because he's taking elements that are familiar. So the film does give us what we want in that way, but it's also he's giving us a thing like a type of set piece we know we loved before, but in a radically different way than you can imagine. He's thinking on
finding fresh new ways to present it.
Yes.
Well, and to that point about like both the way he is like such a competent and more than competent, accomplished action director, I think what's even more important is his mastery of the tone of that action, because the action in a Mad Max movie is sort of haunted. It's very violent. People get shot in the head like there is a mist behind them.
It's
like,
visceral. It's brutal. It's aggressive.
It's sad. And it's sad sometimes. Like people dying sucks, and like there's there's less of a premium put on life in this world of the wasteland, and I think Miller has always taken that stuff very seriously in these movies, but this one especially, I really feel like he's kind of in his old age is like really thinking back on his time as a physician before he became a filmmaker, and really trying to bring that real world, like the grounding of like real world violence to the cinema.
It's in this movie, it's pretty brutal, but the movie is clearly sort of, I think, you said tripling down on these people in the wasteland, the kills. It's not glorified in any way.
No.
I mean, yeah, sure, the action sequence looks cool, but there's some pretty treacherous moments you see in the movie.
Praetorian Jack's cool. Furiosa's cool.
Yeah.
Mary Jacobs is like, all of these like heroes are badass and are like capable fighters. But like while that is like, there's a premium on their skill. Like there's no like catharsis in the violence. Yeah, I don't know. It's really kind of impressive how they've.
Haunted's a good word, because it does. You could see it. It's kind of in everyone's eyes.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. This feeling of dread that any moment it could be my time to go.
Even Dementus, right, who's sort of this kind of comical figure, is still very like.
Yeah, I have
haunted.
to always be on my guard because I don't trust anybody.
Yeah,
all I have is myself to look forward. You know what I
Right,
mean?
yes.
Like, and that same with Furiosa. I mean, that there's just this inner dialogue they're having with themselves about survival at all costs. Yeah.
Well, and any victory that is had by any person is short-lived because the very next moment you could drop like a fly. I mean, I can't
Well,
spoil
the
it, but
resources are so scarce in the wasteland that like all victories are Pyrrhic victories in some ways. Yeah.
well, and then it's interesting. Again, we'll get more to it in spoilers, but there's a couple moments, especially where you see with Dementus almost like taunting people right before they die, and it's so bleak and sad and heartbreaking. But I think the film does a great job at highlighting that without being hopeless and in such a way. It's like this is, but it's also not glorifying and making Dementus, for example, look too cool.
Yeah, and it doesn't overly revel, especially I'm thinking in particular of a couple of deaths by torture that Dementus orchestrates.
Yeah.
And none of them are like, the film gives us enough to be disturbed without like reveling in
Being
sort of
gratuitous, yeah.
Exactly.
gratuitous, exactly. So Caleb, you've kind of seemed like you're on Laron and I's boat here. Why don't you kind of elaborate?
I think the movie is really operating at a high level, and I love how much it complements Fury Road. Dalton, you've already sort of underscored a lot of the differences, but we're focused on the world. The world building's a big piece, but it's able to tell us so much more about the world through character.
Yeah, it's lore that doesn't feel like a lore dump.
Exactly. Right. Like, we saw Bullet Farm. We heard about oil or what's the Gas Town, we heard about these places. But when you think about what did the landscape actually look like? Yeah. We know the episode of Fury Road, but what was actually going on? Like, were those places not being constantly attacked? So you get a lot of world building in terms of how did this world come to be at the status quo it did when Furiosa occurs. There was already huge, massive wars. Hundreds, millions of people died trying to fight for those resources.
The Third World War, the water wars, the oil wars. We hear a lot of both in Fury Road and the beginning of Furiosa. So we sort of get some idea of like the collapse of society as we know it and sort of what the shape of that might have looked like.
And again, I think it does a great job of underlining how limited any sort of like I said, any sort of victory by any person really is. It's you win one day, you're going to get stabbed in the back the next, and even. We know Morton Joe is the big bad in this movie. He's not the big bad. He's a supporting character. He's an obvious evil. But even he who seems to have people worshiping at his feet, we know his days are numbered. So it just sort of shows like how temporary everything is, which makes characters like Furiosa that much more compelling because it's a character who's able to hold on to her humanity as she has to go through such awful trials and atrocities that are committed upon her by everyone.
Because it really is. It is a very bit much a survival of the fittest scenario where the pendulum can swing in anyone's favor at any given moment. And who is in power is going to dictate. You know what I mean? Like what's going to happen for it, and I think that's something we'll dive in a little bit deeper as we get to the ending to this film. But
I think this movie is a triumph. It enhances Fury Road in every way. There's some prequel-y stuff it does, but it's not, it's not too showy about it. It doesn't, I never thought I was taken out of the movie because I was like, oh, that's how she shaved her head. There was none of that dumb, that stuff does happen, but the movie doesn't really.
Yeah, it's not really even a moment.
And it's not really a moment.
It's just she does it. So I did like that. I did assume that was going to be.
Well, it's an evolution of another moment of practicality, right? Like the film kind of seeds these things really cleverly, I feel.
And the other thing I would say, again, we're going to talk about more in spoilers for sure, but yes, Dalton, this movie rips. There's at least 2, if not 3, just like all-timer sequences in this movie that I am going to rewatch I'm going to watch the movie, but like I will go to those specifically when I want to be inspired. I mean, all-timer, sure. But what really sticks out to me, especially the second time, is...
Oh, yeah, we haven't even talked about that. You were able to
I saw it twice.
do 2 viewings.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I caught one in... I haven't seen it in IMAX, but I did see it in the Dolby Cinema and then in a standard screening at the Flix Brew House. And... The moment it was over, I immediately was like, I know I need to watch this again because there's a couple things that I think I'm kind of let down by, but there's a lot of other things that are so interesting that I really need to wrap my head around them. One of them is the ending, which we'll talk about in spoilers. But I will say the movie does not end as you would expect an action movie to end. It ends in a very quiet, thoughtful, ambiguous psychological confrontation, and there's no big action set piece.
It hangs a lot of its own narrative sort of conclusion on your knowledge of Fury Road.
Right.
It's really, as you're saying, it's kind of a quiet ending, and then goes, and by the way, there's a really dope movie that happens after this.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing I would say too is, this film. This film's so big and sprawling and epic, and you see so many years pass by. It almost makes Fury Road feel like
quaint,
like almost like an epilogue to this movie.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I will say
An intense, robust, visceral epilogue.
But, in terms of like how the story is structured, you're like, wow, I just watched this epic, and this is the thing that happened afterwards. By the way, to put a pin in the ideas we already
and this is how she really delivered on sort of becoming who she is.
Mm-hmm. The hope that's sort of a common theme throughout the film. I will say. Nitpick, I think even after the second time, the one thing that I think, and my expectations were through the roof, I did not like the score in this as much as I did the Fury Road score. Now, it's a very different type of score.
It is, yeah. I like it a lot. I'm surprised.
It is very good. I think the thing, and I'm going to go back to it, I actually think the thing that really hurt it was the fact that there's a really badass theme that's played in all the trailers that is actually not in the movie.
Oh yeah,
and it that's not the movie's fault. It's just that the trailers kind of set the tone with this and it's a theme I think it seems like it's an original theme I hadn't heard before, so I assumed it was in the movie. This movie does not have that, and so this is a lot more like it's less flashy
movie score.
Yeah,
at times.
Yes,
yeah. It's like very spooky. And it's Junkie XL again.
Same,
who's now going by Tom. His like government name, right? Tom Holdenbrook.
Yeah,
or whatever.
I need to listen to it disembodied from the movie because I feel like I didn't resonate with me deeply. I would say that. So it didn't stand out to me as much as Fury Road. But
so whereas Fury Roads is like very propulsive, and you can honestly just listen to the score and it kind of tells its own story in terms of how the film's structured in a lot of ways, in terms of like how the action rises and all those things.
Yeah,
this is a lot more like a vibe score. Okay. I thought, it's like, okay, this is setting the scene. This is how I'm supposed to feel in the moment. Less about,
it's not throbbing. It's just kind of
less shredding guitar.
It's
right,
just kind of setting it.
But not bad. It's not bad, but it's just that's the one thing that I think if I wish was a little stronger.
Sure.
But since we're in technicals, do you mind if I ask you guys about the look of this film? Because I know obviously, Miller wasn't able to get his DP from the last film. I can't think of his name. The guy that did The English Patient.
Yeah.
But John Seal, there we go. Who he's worked with some, I believe. But he couldn't get him to come back because he's like fully retired, basically,
like in his 80s, and he's I want to go spend time with my grandkids.
That was my biggest fear with the trailer, because I mean I heard a lot of people say it looks just like the other one, and I was like, I actually see a distinction.
I think it just looks decidedly different.
It does have a different vibe to it. I think that the CGI, which I noticed a lot more this time, it's not egregious.
No,
they use it where it's absolutely, we can't get this shot.
It feels like desert extensions mostly.
Exactly,
kind of like the way we would use matte paintings back in the day.
So, but you could still see the practical effects and the stunt work is there. It's so I think it's more present than it was in Fury Road, but it's not obnoxious.
It's almost. Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say it's almost shinier, and it does look more like a sort of a 21st century film in that way than Fury Road. But I almost kind of like that. I think it sort of adds to this sort of the myth of Furiosa, right? It kind of makes this kind of larger tone of bombast and epic grandeur kind of work, as far as like being a little less gritty than Fury Road and a little bit more like, if Fury Road is sort of the palette of Midgard, then Furiosa is the palette of Valhalla, right? Like if we're going to kind of put it in the world's terms in some way, I just think there's something. Again, normally if I'm saying something's kind of shiny and new looking, that's not usually something I'm excited about in the look of a film. But I was kind of surprised how much I ended up kind of clicking with what they were going for in this one.
I also think you could argue. I mean, this is kind of how I thought of it. The wasteland it deteriorates over time, and it begins 15 years earlier. I mean, even the motorcycles are a lot cleaner, and you see those visually decay throughout the film. I don't know. That's a loose read. I wouldn't say that was necessarily intentional, but it's a way I was kind of like, well, yeah, things are a little cleaner in this film because it takes place so much longer before the Fury Road. But you know,
it was a less wasteful wasteland. You know,
well, you know, like Dementus had his bikes, especially like were really polished and clean, and you know, there's just things like that
grime on it yet.
Yeah. But no, the CG didn't bother me. Honestly, where it sticks out to me is not the action scenes. There's a couple of there's like a scene where you see this at the Morton Joe's fortress,
the Citadel.
The Citadel, thank you. Where they're all standing there. You can just see a little bit. It's either green screen or the volume or something. There's some like weird choices that, especially the second time, stuck out a lot more.
Especially when they do side character profiles of faces looking up, and then you have like the lines. They're really you can see that where
compositing.
Yeah, it's very, very obvious. Not a deal breaker, but it is not as polished in that way.
And they're few and far between.
Right.
And like you said, when the action cooks, it's just it's really like
I really didn't during the actual like big set pieces. I didn't notice CG hardly at all. Honestly.
I was too engaged. Yeah,
right. What'd you guys think of Chris Hemsworth's Dementus?
He's like. This is like one of my favorite performances of his, I think. Absolutely. Yeah, I do think the nose is a little distracting. The prosthesis they've got on him sort of took me out of it a few times. But as I say that, I also kind of like what it does to his voice. It sort of makes him a little more nasally. I heard him talking in an interview. I think he was saying it's his granddad's accent what he's trying to land on, just sort of this old backwoods Australian guy accent. Yeah, I love what he's doing here. This sort of evil in a jolly way. Very interesting character. And I think different than what we get from Morton Joe and his sons in the first film and in this film as well. Or in the last film, I should say, in this film. Yeah, I think it's a very interestingly calibrated villain performance for sure.
He's going ham. Ham, and I'm into that, especially in a world like Mad Max, where everything's already so much larger than life. Yeah. Having someone that comes in and really elevates the energy levels, in a movie like this, where the action's not as propulsive, he carries a lot of the scenes that are quieter. I mean, he's loud, but I mean, in terms of like the drama or the story that's being displayed on screen, I think he really carries a lot of those. And again, Furiosa's hardly talking at all, even less than Max and Fury Road. So he has to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of giving us a point of view on the wasteland. In the film. Some people have been down on it, but I really think it works for me. I love that he's able to really break out and do things he could never do as playing, in the Extraction movies or in the Thor movies. He's just hamming it up. Kind of reminds me. I'm not saying it's. Careful with the comparison, but it does remind me of how when we got Heath Ledger's Joker, he just kind of took it and ran with it and went super hard. Dementus is a fundamentally different character, but I do see shades of that of an actor who's like just been waiting to like have a chance to just go. Laron?
Yeah, so I feel like I'll get a lot of flack for this, but I preferred him to Anya Taylor Joy in this, and that's
wow.
I just felt he took. I mean, and I think she's great in it. I want to say that I think she was great in it as well. Doesn't get many lines, but she gets a lot. She does a lot with her face, and it's in her eyes specifically.
Convinced that's exactly why they cast her.
Well, exactly, because she does act with her eyes quite a bit, And I think what's interesting is, even though I read that she got maybe 30 to 31 lines in the entire movie, and they're not like grand, like some of them are just very like matter of fact, like words like let's go. You know what I mean? Like, but
I am Furiosa.
Exactly. Yeah. So like, but I felt like, he brought a theatricality to it that I liked. And I thought that this is the most range I've ever seen. I've liked him fine. I mean, he's done comedy pretty well. Obviously the Thor character is the most known one, but what is it? Cabin in the Woods. Like he's shown he can do some things. He's not just a pretty face, so I think that this with I think helps distract from how beautiful he is as a man, that they just gave him that beak nose, that you're not just so, you know what I mean? You can take him seriously as a character and not this, you know what I mean? Just as, stupidly attractive leading man. And I think that helped me. So the beak nose worked for me in making me, just see him as this character. And I thought he did a great job. So
Teddy bear is so sinister.
Oh man, the way it's like strapped onto him too, like with its arms stretched sometimes. Yeah. Oh man,
very, very weird.
Yeah, he's terrifying though. Just owns up every scene. And then there's another thing. Again, we'll probably talk about more in spoilers, but there's something kind of tragic about him a little bit in that he's this guy who is sort of populist, in terms of the fact that he's like, you guys have all these resources, why don't we get any?
Mhm.
And he's very committed to being on top. There's like he's villainous, he's self-important. It's all driven by
He has a brutal
nihilism,
Yeah.
but
he has a brutal way about going about what he's doing, but what he's actually wants isn't unreasonable. You know what I mean? Like, so it's his approach to
Right.
it, But
I say very light tragedy, but there's something like, especially when you get towards the end of the movie and you get a little bit, you don't get a lot, but what you get, you're like, oh, that's kind of sad.
It kind of represents like a certain action movie way of processing grief, right?
Mhm.
Like he sort of does represent the man who lost it all. Like he definitely
Mhm.
has shades of Furiosa and Mad Max, and sort of like similarly like a character who's seen tragedy and been reshaped by it.
Well, imagine Furiosa or Mad Max but with charisma, honestly.
There you go.
Think about it.
Interesting, yeah.
So how would I think there's a lot more to talk about in spoilers, but before we do, how would you rank the Mad Max films, or at least the ones that you've seen so far? Dalton, Stuart.
Yeah, we'll leave out Beyond Thunderdome since I don't have a full watch of that. I'm just gonna fully sequester that. I don't feel like it would be appropriate for me to put it in my ranking. But obviously, it's boom, Fury Road right at the top, no question. I mean, pretty unimpeachable, number one with a bullet. But I gotta say, number two for me is Furiosa, and there is some recency bias there, obviously. But I think this movie rocks. And then right behind that is Fury Road, or I'm sorry, The Road Warrior in the original. But I think all these films are very good to perfect.
Yeah.
I think they're very fun movies and one of our more interesting explorations of the idea of dystopia and societal collapse.
One that's had a lot of influence and staying power too.
Truly,
I think to be
truly.
undersold. Anytime you think of like the wasteland future, it's definitely riffing on Mad Max.
They're
and
able to
other pop
mine
culture.
quite a bit out of it,
The Fallout, Amazon's biggest show, second biggest show of all time, would not exist without the video games, which would not exist without Mad Max.
That is
100%. Yeah.
Mm.
Laron, how would you rank the series?
Yeah, Fury Road is number one. And I'm going back and forth with Furiosa and Road Warrior. I feel like you said with recency bias, I have just seen it, but I also only saw Road Warrior the one time. But now it's been some years. And so, but I think like today in this moment, I think that Furiosa would get second place, then Road Warrior, then Thunderdome, and then Mad Max. So,
Laron, you and I got to stop agreeing on this podcast because that's exactly my ranking. Here's honestly
where's our Blue Velvet argument? We need
Right.
that with each other.
I will
Mr.
say,
Roger Ebert.
I really think Furiosa and Fury Road, it's all about what kind of movie you're wanting to watch, because I think they're both very, very close. And in a lot of ways, I really think I can't wait to do them as a double feature, because it really does feel like one big epic story that Fury Road closes up. And I just keep thinking about the fact that Furiosa is so easy to watch. That's honestly what sets it apart for me. Is this Furiosa is great, but it's a slow, big, sprawling, thoughtful, emotional movie that I will absolutely be rewatching. But it's one I'll probably have to like carve out some time and be like, all right, I need. Versus Fury Road, in which I have so many times just turned it on while I'm doing whatever, and then I just immediately get locked on to the movie and distracted from whatever it was I was doing in the first place.
Yeah.
So for me, number one, Fury Road, then Furiosa, then Road Warrior, then Beyond the Thunderdome, and then Mad Max, the original, I think is where I stand. And I feel pretty confident about that.
Yeah.
That said,
Really, the only wiggle room here is between Road Warrior and Furiosa, I think, for all of us. I think that's kind of...
That sounds about right. And for me,
it seems like the bottom two are always going to be Mad Max and Beyond the Thunderdome.
Yeah, I think so. Well, what letter grade would you give Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, Laron?
I would give it an 89.99999 with room to grow. I need to see it again. There were a couple of pacing issues for me, but just by it was a big sprawl. I didn't really care for the intertitles. I don't think it added anything to it. I think that the passage of time was clear without it being spelled out. But that's just minor quibbles. I think this is something that I will revisit multiple times. I think the set pieces are incredible. And as you mentioned, like just as we mentioned before, like they're different and fresh and new, but still have the same energy as what we loved about Fury Road. So I think this is a pretty fantastic prequel, which is weird to say in 2024,
right?
Because, like as we said, I don't think I can make a list of 10 that I like, So this will be on that. So the next 10 years, when we come around to this question, this will be on there as one of the prequels that got it right.
Will Furiosa be one of your top 10 movies of the decade? I know we're only in year 4. So who knows, right?
That is a deeper question.
Are there still going to be movies in 2030? I'm not sure, but
Megalopolis, that'll be here.
Can't wait. Bring on the Megapolis Hive. Dalton, Stuart, what letter grade would you give the film?
Yeah, I think we're looking at an A-. I don't know what to tell you. This movie rocks. It was a movie I was a little cool on coming out of the theater, and then just, I was kind of sitting around a B+, and it really has appreciated for me. I thought the Fury Road montage over the opening or closing credits was sort of a weird choice, but I've decided it doesn't really matter that much. I like enough about what works here that any quibbles I have are sort of minor and secondary to a larger appreciation for what they pulled off and how they've made a film that really does feel like it adds something to Fury Road, as far as giving you more on truly the protagonist of Fury Road and giving some more on that really interesting character and sort of building out this larger world of the Wasteland. I think it's just all really well executed. Even stuff that I was less sure on, we get, allusions to, I can't remember, it's a 60-day, 100-day, this X number of days Wasteland war, that is kind of told to us through montage and is sort of a time jump in the film to kind of get us to our final act. And that was a bit that I was a little unsure on, but has kind of grown on me as I've thought about it. So again, every quibble I have as I think on it sort of bothers me less.
That's a moment that the first time I watched it bothered me too. But I think when you put it, for me, when I put moments like that, because there's a lot of them, and also the narration, a part of it too. The narration, the montages like that really stuck. It brings that whole thing into the frame of this is a myth that's been passed down for generations.
Yeah.
And that's why if you're expecting a big action sequence, that thing that you think you're about to get, you don't. But also when you're looking at the movie as a whole and you know what you're looking at, I think it actually lands quite powerfully.
Yeah,
that's good. Good call. I'm also going to go A-. I waffle between a B+ and an A-. But man, I haven't seen anything like this movie before at this scale.
Yeah.
The fact that it's firing on all these cylinders at such a high level.
Delivered in ways that even like Dead Reckoning Part 1 last year didn't deliver. It's been a while since I feel like something with this much bombast like really hit like it was supposed to. And that box office has got me feeling hurt.
It's hurting. I'm just saying, listeners, and I'll keep saying it to everyone I talk to who, if you liked Fury Road, please go see this movie. If you think I love that movie, don't be like, I got other stuff. Like, yeah, I know you do, but like, make time. It's worth it.
I didn't expect it to win the summer or the year, but I didn't expect it to come in that low. I mean, and it's not abysmal, the number, but it's odd. It seems like this was what did we have to do this weekend?
It would be one thing if I felt like all the Mad Max Fury Road heads I know went out to the movie, but I know I've talked to a lot of them where I was like texting them. I was like, "Hey, are you gonna go see it? Oh, that's coming out this weekend. Oh man, I don't, and it's just like, not that you need to make it.
So whereas we were anticipating it, they're getting around to it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I forgot that was even a thing that was coming out. I will say though, really interesting experience. I saw this the second time with my friend Daniel Stoll, co-host on the Cast Beyond the Wall, who had never seen Fury Road, did not know until we got to the theater that he hadn't seen it, and I was like, I'm super interested in what you think of Fury Road after you watch this movie because it's gonna hit differently, right? Anyway.
Yeah.
So if you are out there, listeners, and you saw Furiosa but not Fury Road, email us your experience at thecinemetropolis@gmail.com. What other movie recommendations or movie, television, novel, video game recommendations would you give listeners who enjoy Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga? Laron?
For a lean, just car chase kind of movie, I always recommend Tarantino's Death Proof.
Yeah.
It's another one of those that you could say is simplistic and isn't saying much, but if you really listen to the conversations that are being had, even the ones that seem like they're meandering into nothing, there's something happening here. Whether it's just about female camaraderie, their own personal anxieties about the world, but it's also just a kick-ass like chase scene, like one that still just holds very dear in my heart. So
God, what a scene!
Yeah, 20 minutes of just mayhem, but just well executed. Like I can't watch that scene and not be impressed with how it was made. So I recommend that. And then as prequels go, television shows, I know you and I are at least modest fans of House of the Dragon. I think, so I'm
way better than it should be, probably.
Yeah. So I'm I didn't think I needed to revisit that world, and it's making me care about it in ways I didn't think I could after the finale of the show. So.
Well, I'll say this, Laron. That's a great little pre-promo. Cast Beyond the Wall. I haven't figured out how we're going to do it yet, but we're going to come back this year. We might not be back weekly, but you go look up House of the Dragon Heads, go to goodtrashmedia.com, or look up the podcast, The Cast Beyond the Wall, on your podcast player of choice. Thank you, Laron.
Yeah.
House of the Dragon. Turns out.
I did that for you.
I love you, man. I love you, man. Pretty good. Dalton, Stuart?
I want to have a car chase recommendation too. You catch up with the classic Bullet with Steve McQueen. Yeah, zipping around San Francisco. It's a cool car chase. But honestly, the whole time I was watching Furiosa, I kept thinking to myself, man, gotta buy that Mad Max game again.
It was pretty good.
It's pretty good.
Except for George Miller was trashing it on the press circuit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he got asked about it. And he's like, I wish Hideo Kojima would make it, but I think he's too busy.
That's so funny. The game's fun. I like driving around the wasteland.
I thought it was good.
Yeah.
That sounds fun. What is it on?
It would have been last gen, so PlayStation 4 and Xbox One.
I have the older,
And I think it's also, if you have a new Xbox, you can still play it backwards compatibly, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
And everything works on a computer,
Yeah, that's right. Dalton, being the master race PC gamer over here.
Well, look, I'm all about efficiency, Caleb. I'm all about efficiency. Yeah, that game kind of sick. I remember really having fun with it, and I do plan on replaying it. Honestly, I kind of got done with the game when I unlocked my V8 engine, and now I got to go back in. I got to get that V8.
You got to see if there's any Easter eggs in the game.
Glorious V8.
That's right. Yes. Witness. Yeah.
I love, the hands for like the V8 cylinders. So funny.
Oh, it's incredible.
So goofy.
It's like a religious symbol.
Yeah, I love it.
Did you like the bit where the history man was talking about the Harley Davidson motorcycle, describing?
Yeah, awesome.
Like it was like a religion of something. It was incredible.
The training of the Black Thumbs, truly. That part. I'm so into that. The montage of building the war rig.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I just recently caught up with Sorcerer. So yeah, I'm all about watching build a truck and then do dope shit with it.
Oh man, that's another podcast. Sorcerer, one of the most underrated movies of all time.
That movie's incredible.
Incredible. I'm going to throw out, actually another one that I think is dealing with some similar ideas in a very different way, without as cool action and not as well written, but I still think it might be worth your time at least a little bit. The Book of Eli, not a bad movie. Not a bad movie. Not a great movie.
Dystopia.
It's good. It's probably streaming somewhere right now. It's got
the blind Denzel.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he's trying to transport the book across the wasteland. There's some cool ideas.
I enjoyed that one.
Yeah. It's like a perfect matinee or a stream. Now it'll be like a streamer. It's a good one to turn on. You have to go with Cormac McCarthy's The Road. I mean, I don't think we actually get Mad Max. These things kind of
also
evolve
their own.
Yeah, the movie. Different Charlize
for sure.
She is
haunted still.
She is very haunted. I was thinking of the book, but also the movie is very good as well. I think, Laron, you recommended this earlier. Or if you want to go for just a totally different type of dystopia, maybe one that's not crumbling, but maybe it's taken over by fascism, or at least fascism that looks a little different than the Wasteland. Equilibrium, starring Christian Bale, because that movie's got some sick action, gung fu, gun kata. What is it, Dalton? I don't know.
Gun kata, yeah.
Thank you.
A classic dumb guy, smart guy movie.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So check it out. Yeah, what a great time. And then go play Fallout, any of them.
Well, we talked about Sorcerer, but like Sorcerer's a movie that's kind of about everything without really talking about the things it's about.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
It's, people doing cool stuff with trucks. Yeah.
Transporting stuff across
Yeah,
treacherous.
inhospitable terrain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorcerer, ladies and gentlemen, came
That
out
bridge scene.
like 2 weeks after Star Wars or something like that in 1977, and
freaking 8.
way cooler. I mean, I love Star Wars, but that movie is way more impressive in terms of.
And so few people have seen that comparatively. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Go check that out. That is, again, Sorcerer. And no, there are no magic Harry Potter
Sorcerer's
people.
the truck.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right, well, we're about to head into the spoiler section, you know, where 3 men enter, 1 man leaves. So if you don't want to be spoiled, go ahead and tune out now.
Now, when men get to fighting, it happens here, and it finishes here. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
All right, so I want to talk about this idea that's running throughout the film about using revenge to plant the seeds of hope, which on its face, even when I wrote that in the show notes, I'm like, this feels contradictory, but that's why I really wanted to break it apart and think through it. So this film is an epic 10.5 decade revenge story of both Furiosa and Dementus. I actually think it's about both of them, not just the one.
Sure. I mean, we get a lot of Dementus time in this movie.
Lots of time. Like there's entire sequences that he's the guy, you know?
Yeah.
And instead of the film concluding with a big fight or battle scene, as I mentioned, it ends with a very intimate confrontation that doesn't actually fully conclude definitively, but again, feeds back into the mythology of Furiosa. Maybe she shot him in the back of the head. Maybe she struck him behind the car. Well, but this guy over here heard that she planted him, she put soil on top of him and used his body and his nutrients to become the peach tree that would grow into, it was the tree that provided the fruit to get to the brides of a Morton Joe who would then escape in Fury Road. Again, long
Poetic justice.
Yes. So what does Furiosa's journey through hell to get her vengeance really tell us about this film's core idea of hope and how those two things are kind of both at odds and one and the same? Laron?
I think it shows how fragile hope is, and how hard fought and messy it can be, and how it's work both to obtain it and to maintain it. And when I think of this, and it's weirdly, I don't know why I always think of elections when I come to this, maybe because we're in an election year, but I think back to when Obama's campaign slogan was hope, and how transformative it felt like, or at least we thought, whenever he won, and how smart of a slogan it was, because that one word is exactly what everyone was needing in that particular moment. And he kind of, embodied that, in his demeanor and in his messaging. And then for that 8-year run, it felt like we had gone on a path, of change, like transformative change in the world as it pertains to race relations and what have you, and then very immediately learned we did not, and the illusion is gone. And that just shows that we took it for granted for that length of time, and we didn't hold it precious dear. But back to Furiosa, it seems like she planted a seed of hope here at the end, literally and figuratively. But definitely, like, her biggest challenge is still ahead of her. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where it leaves. It's not that it's, in a way, it's anticlimactic, but we know that because we have Fury Road, for her to go through. She's still in captivity to a certain extent. She's still living in this realm where she doesn't have the agency to do whatever she wants. So,
yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Hope is sort of the fuel for us to pursue our dreams or accomplish these great things. Those battles are hard fought, and they can just as easily be taken away from you. Much like The Wasteland, I think, demonstrates several times. And there's moments in the film where you feel like the wind is blowing in Furiosa's favor when she connects and has that romantic relationship with Jack, and Praetorian Jack, excuse me. And then we see, just as fast as that romance blooms, it is taken away from her in pretty brutal fashion. And I think the fact that Dementus is the one who gives that speech about there is no hope right before he kills brutally tortures Praetorian Jack, really speaks to, no matter how powerful it feels when it's in the palm of your hand, it can be taken away just that quickly.
And
you have to always keep fighting. It's never over. And again, you said even when she is victorious in this movie, she's really preparing to take that dream to a broader place for the brides of Immortan Joe in the next film.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and she doesn't get the catharsis that you think, that she would get from it. When she comes back, there still feels like there's this heaviness that she has to carry moving forward. But yeah,
I do think that's why we end on sort of a recap of Fury Road, because the film knows that it kind of lacks catharsis in its own like story beats. It is sort of, this person went through this terrible thing, kind of got revenge, but found it deeply unsatisfying. And what ultimately like offered self-actualization was providing hope to other people when the hope that she thought she could have in her own life was taken from her. Right. And again, obviously, like this arc gets paid off in Fury Road when they find out what happened to the Green Place. But I think it's interesting how it's sort of an anti-revenge movie in some ways. Obviously many stories about revenge sort of explore the heavy toll that revenge takes on your soul. But I think this film does a really interesting job of sort of exploring that without being too like, oh, you dig two graves or whatever, being too sort of on the nose about its exploration of this idea of like seeking retribution. And again, like the ways in which hope is constantly taken from her by the forces that be, right? Because she's almost, rescued by her mother, and then that ends so horrifically. And like, again, we have in Dementus, we have this guy who like positions himself as a hero of the wasteland, right? He's like this leader of this horde, and he's going to redistribute the resources of the wasteland. And I have this child, and I protect her from every lecherous gaze for all these years.
Little D.
Like, yeah, so put her in a cage, dog.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? Like, the way Dementus sort of like positions himself within his own mind as a hero is, I think, really interesting and sort of speaks to, again, his idea, his sort of nihilism about like hope as something that can't possibly exist in the new world of the wasteland is it's just sort of so antithetical to like Furiosa's quest to return home, that again, just like having them at odds with each other just only furthers this story of vengeance, even though we spend the second half of the film with them totally apart, and like he doesn't really understand who he's doing battle with until those final moments. And even it like takes forever. Does he even fully realize that she's little D?
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't remember. Thank you.
Yeah. It's
twice,
after she beats the crap out of him,
right.
and he has the moment right before she like knocks him out where he's like, oh, little D.
That a fun George Miller touch, him using his background as a physician. Love the multiple pistol whippings leading to a seizure is sort of a fun like medical detail that I was just like, okay, go off, George. Yeah, that's just like nobody else is doing that. That's just such a George Miller touch. But anyway, I know we're kind of getting like really sort of
into it
high level about like how hope functions in this film.
I think it's important though, because again, oftentimes you feel like you don't see hope framed in a revenge story like this often. And in the victory for her, it's not necessarily catharsis as much as it's that she is able to remember what she's really doing this for in the first place by the end of the movie. And I think the other thing that sort of pays off between the films that's really interesting, and you mentioned the Green Place, she in this film kind of ends by saying, I want my childhood back. I want my mom back. Yeah. And that's the thing, is the hope is what carried her through all of the pain and the suffering, sort of this idea that maybe she could return to it. And when you and it does carry her through this movie, but when you pair it with Fury Road, I think it's an even more interesting and compelling idea, which is that thing that fuels you no longer exists. So what are you going to do with what you have now? Yeah. Because she's also simultaneously become this beacon of hope for so many people in Fury Road.
I think all of this too speaks to, I'm going to take some stray shots at Zack Snyder, because why not? But like thinking about action filmmakers who are real ones, like Miller here, just like seeing like you can have a female action heroine motivated by revenge who hasn't been sexually assaulted. Like that's just, it's so easy. I know it's like easy for me to go ahead and highlight that aspect of the film, but because Furiosa is this small child around all these like very dangerous, unhinged adults, like it seems like a possible threat a couple of times. And the film does a really good job of like not letting you worry about that and being like, no, don't worry. Like, she's going to be like taken care of insofar as that's not going to happen. The damage that she's going to undergo is going to be much more psychological. And obviously, like, Miller takes seriously the sort of particular dangers women would face in this world, right? With Immortan Joe's Brides, with the torture of Mary Jacobsa, Furiosa's mother. Like, we definitely are like, we're not shying away from the realities of what this sort of collapsed civilization looks like, this fallen world. But like, we are still trying to tell a story that is not like
Focused on that,
like reveling in exploitative violence.
Well,
right?
and there's even the moment where you think it's possible that maybe Immortan Joe's son is a Rectus.
Rictus is
Rectus
like
is maybe do something, and then the movie's like, nah.
Scrotus, was it Erectus and Scrotus?
Yeah, Scrotus and Rectus, yeah.
The
Halloween costumes decided.
Seriously.
Can't wait.
Is Scrotus in the first one? I know he's in the video game.
He's not. He is not in the first movie.
Okay, I think he dies in the video.
He must die in the video.
Canon.
That's what I was wondering about the video game because the script was done before the movie. That means they probably used it as a secondary source for the game.
Yeah. Anyway, neither here nor there. But yeah, I think like even that threat of potential like, you know, sexual violence is like dealt with really interestingly, and again like shows, and instead of, you know, lingering on sort of that being an ongoing plot detail, it sort of like motivates Furiosa's escape into life as a war boy. And again, like shows us another moment of her resourcefulness with like the wig decoy. Again, the movie kind of like, again, takes these things seriously, but as you said, is like, no, we're not going there. Don't worry about it. This is a different kind of movie. We don't need to do that here.
And its idea of hope is like, it's hope drenched in like brutal reality though, because it's the idea that like the best version of what we're going to have at this point is not the paradise any of us can dream up. It's still going to be hard, whatever it is, just going to be less awful than this. You know what I mean? And that kind of seems to be like, you know, kind of what the jadedness of it is. It's like, I'm surviving, but life is still going to be so heavy and hard. You know,
so it's like, it's cool that we get this glimpse of sort of the Green Place and the Volvolini and like their whole deal and like their culture being kind of set up around protecting this place and knowing that if like the outside wasteland finds out what they have, it will be lost.
Yeah.
It's sort of like kind of fun texture for just sort of what motivates that society. We get an even smaller glimpse of in Fury Road.
Yeah.
It's definitely like one of the most exciting things about Furiosa is that opening act and just kind of getting more backstory on like Furiosa's clan and sort of what kind of world she came from.
Well, and again, I just love so much how much it feels like mythology. It reminds me a lot. I mean, you mentioned the Iliad and the Odyssey, but there's also this sort of like really Old Testament book of Genesis, like not that the biblical parallels are direct, but like there's this garden that's bountiful, and we must make sure no one ever discovers it. And it, you know, it feels like
I think the biblical undertones are pretty there.
Yeah,
you know, like I don't think it's being, you know, it's shying away from those correlations, but
I think it really works well because the elements feel like a thing that's being put on the screen that was like talked about as a thing a long time ago that no one ever saw, but here's what it looked like. Maybe, it's great world building, really impressive stuff. So, I mean, in terms of Dementus, I know Dalton, you already touched on this a little bit. You know, what do we think about this character's journey, and what does this tell us about sort of the evolution of power in the wasteland? Because I actually found it to be pretty compelling. This guy who was able to, as a grassroots leader, just round up all these biker gangs out of fear and awfulness, got a pretty sizable motorcycle army that he couldn't actually keep together long enough to take down Immortan Joe.
Yeah, it just sort of the power structure and struggle that goes on throughout this is just sort of kind of an interesting exploration of like unconventional nation states, right? It is sort of, we've got this like horde of raiders who probably have the numbers to take on the Citadel, but the Citadel is a much more, you know, highly fortified location, has a much more loyal group of warriors. And so we get like this push and pull between the struggle for bullets and gasoline and food, and sort of these are the things keeping the wasteland running. And like Dementus seeing this triangle of power and knowing he has to insert himself somehow to stay relevant, that like having a horde is nothing if you have a heavily fortified location that produces value. And so like that's so interesting. And then again, like what little we get of his backstory of him being like, he's just motivated by the death of his family, and that is like what sent him fully over the edge into being like a wasteland madman. It's like, wow, really? That's all it took, buddy? Kind of seems like you were waiting for this, you know?
I mean, he's definitely an egotistical narcissist. There's no doubts about it. Who's kind of living his own little fantasy land, but he's got the charisma to attract the people to him. But
for sure,
there is the hint
and,
of
like,
sadness.
Knows what to tell them, right? Knows to promise. Well, I'll feed you more than this guy will if you help me take it from him.
But I also think, yes, the backstory is very thin with him, but it's just a nice touch of, you and me, we're basically the same person. Like, I know why you're here.
Yeah, I know what it's like to lose and feel defined by it.
Right. And even at the end, he's like, I'm yours, kill me, whatever. You know, he's like, because if he were in that same spot, he would do the same thing. Yeah. Laron, what did you make of the character?
Yeah, I thought that final monologue, where he kind of compares the tragedies, his tragedies to hers as kind of the motivation. And how he's kind of reflecting on how loss can crystallize, into rage, and how just a little bit of it, is enough to motivate him, to do conquering. And I think that what's interesting, though, is that I feel like she sees that as kind of a means to an end, but he actually sees it as a necessary kind of catalyst, you know what I mean, to actually do the dominating, and I found that interesting. And I think the movie, sees it more as an omen, as an omen for like, even for her, because as they're having that argument, it doesn't seem like she's disagreeing with his perspective. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to be just as much as monstrous as me if this is what you're using to get you through, to the next moment. And I think that if she ever in any capacity was able to be in power, you know what I mean? Like, would you be that different from me? You know what I mean? Because you look at what you're starting with. You know what I mean? Like, and so even though we're rooting for it because we've seen the horrible things that have happened to her, we haven't had the, Dementus origin story where maybe we would have similar sentiments for him before he became who he was. So I think that was an interesting way of making that conflict more complex for her. So. That you can't thrive on this forever because it will eat away at you. So
you have to find something else.
Exactly.
Right?
So
yeah, I mean, I think you guys said it really well. Again, I just think the fact that there's this whole history, there's a whole 40-day war, whatever that happens, that these resources are very scarce. I don't know. It was just nice added characters like him often don't work, in my opinion, where it was like, oh, they were there all along, where actually there was this guy who was a big deal who we just never mentioned before. And in this case, it kind of makes sense because of the way the power in the wasteland works and how lean Fury Road is. But it was a nice added texture, and it gave Furiosa so much more meaning to have that opposite number type character there. Also, the guy's just a blast to watch. The nipple ring thing. I mean, ruthless. Yeah. Ruthless.
And how much of a sliding door it is with the power structure here. It was like, he's the big bad now, but give it a year, one angry woman. You know what I mean? Like, and then he's gone. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the reality of the wasteland, is that your days are numbered and you're always looking over your shoulders. So I found that palpable tension throughout.
There's also this, like, we don't really get to explore too much, but like the whole reason the rest of the wasteland unites behind Furiosa against Dementus is that, like, what he's doing is unsustainable. He's like asking for too much food, not producing enough gas, and like setting up like an economy that will collapse.
Exactly.
Just sort of, again, like one of those interesting like little bits of lore and texture that just kind of adds like reality to this kind of mythical world.
Yeah. Like, there are still rules, even the ones that weren't laid out in Fury Road, about who even people with power have to manage it wisely, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying, Laron, though, I think the last thing I'd say is I love that he's this character who gives Furiosa fuel, but we don't fully realize what she's capable of and what her mission was, even if she didn't know it was until the end of Fury Road, which is to liberate this entire wasteland in a sort of way. So I don't know. It's a nice touch. Did you guys like the Mad Max cameo in the movie?
That's kind of fun. Yeah. It's cute.
Yeah.
You guys caught it, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
and
cool,
the
cool.
wide shot.
Yeah.
Just eating beans or whatever.
It was a stunt double for Tom Hardy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Tom Hardy's too expensive, I guess.
Well, yeah, for one shot, yeah. You're dropping Tom Hardy money for one wordless cameo.
Made some beans in the desert.
Yeah.
Oh my god. So real quick, just to wrap us down here, we've already talked about this quite a bit actually, so maybe we'll keep it short. But Furiosa really operates in a completely different way than Fury Road. Instead of that pedal to the metal action, non-stop pulse pounding chase sequence, this is a slower 5-act epic, as you said, Dalton, not unlike the Odyssey to the Iliad, telling the story of wasteland gang war for resources through the eyes of those two lead characters. I guess this is more of a, from a story perspective, somewhat technical. But I think it's important that we draw the distinction, because I've tried really hard to tell people this is a very different movie. Well, what does that mean? I know we say, oh, it's structurally different, but what are the trade-offs in terms of, as a story, about making the shift, the focus away from the action chase scene and into this big 5-story world-building, myth-making epic? Dalton?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you have an interest in sort of this depiction of a world gone mad, right, as Max puts it in Fury Road, I do think that this kind of larger sprawling narrative will be really attractive to you, especially if you have affection for Fury Road. I do think that this offers a lot as far as kind of deepening our understanding of the world George Miller created and sort of his understanding of how it works. And again, I think that 5-act structure just like adds to the overall aesthetic of the film and just kind of cements its, as like sort of monumental as Fury Road is. It is, again, very straightforward, very stripped down at some level. And this feels so epic and monumental in some ways that even Fury Road doesn't. Again, I think Fury Road is still the stronger film overall. I think the longer runtime is maybe a mistake. I think we could maybe get 15 minutes shaved off somewhere. So I think there are problems in that trade-off, and I think you end up with a shaggier film for sure, and one that doesn't hum at quite as high a frequency. But I think there's still a lot to love here. And again, I think the trade-off is worth it because of what you get. And again, like the action sequences are still incredible. The like Jack's attempt to escape Bullet Farm while Furious is covering him with sniper fire and like trying to take out Dementus. That whole sequence is incredible. Again, we already talked about the big rig chase in part 3, the stowaway.
But even that all that motorcycle chase at the beginning with their mom, like the kind of like escape and rescue thing.
Mary Jacobs' stuff is awesome. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Her holding down that like choke point, trying to give Furiosa time to escape. Like all that's like so tragic and cool. But again, like as you said, some fun motorcycle stunts. The film just like fully delivers, and I guess that's the other thing it gets you that Fury Road doesn't, is kind of a variety of action sequences. Obviously Fury Road also kind of has 4 big set pieces, but they kind of bleed together because it's all part of this one larger chase. And I feel like this film like does definitively separates its little sequences,
right, and differentiates them too.
Yes, lets them kind of be their own thing. I think especially that the chase scene where Jack and Furiosa like try to make it out to the green place. I think that whole sequence is like really cool and not really like anything in. It is like a much smaller version of Fury Road, right? It's 2-person escape and is yes, kind of an escape like Fury Road, but to me feels so different in terms of stakes and execution.
Mm-hmm. Well, that one's a lot more haunting too, just because you know that there's this giant truck it's just a cool visual.
I've seen people say that like 3,000 Years of Longing is the film that'll actually really help you unlock Furiosa.
I do love that movie.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that sort of the epic scale and myth making of that film has really found its way into Furiosa for sure.
Interesting.
I hadn't thought about it in that way.
Yeah, I don't know that I would have.
The way he's thinking about larger ancient histories and how those stories are passed down and how we interpret them and what it looks like in the context of very specific genre stories, I don't know, man, it's cool.
Yeah, I don't know that I would have got to it on my own. I think it was Finnessy over on The Ringer I heard mention it, and I really, like, this guy started chewing on that really hard, like, oh, yeah. So, yeah, that's something I've been thinking about, is sort of how this film connects to 3,000 Years of Longing, which I love that movie too. honestly.
Gosh, should have put it in alternate media recommendations. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, Miller's career is so interesting, especially this later period has been really phenomenal.
I can't. The guy's 79, but I don't know if he's going to get to make another
No
Mad
one's making
Max
action
movie.
movies like him.
Oh no, not even close.
He's just like such a sense of geography and like where things are at and what's happening, and like you're always so clear on like the stakes and what's going on.
Yeah.
How many people are crawling around the truck at any given time? All that stuff.
Like, okay, that guy's still alive. That guy's still alive. That car's
and
still
you don't even know their
left.
names, which is crazy.
Yeah.
That
guy with the horns is back.
Okay,
where they are.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll do this because we're at the very end. Just a really cool moment, cool visual. Yeah, the big rig chase sequence was incredible. Pulse pounding, all the things. It's amazing. The visual of the dude with the horns flying down with a jet engine behind him with the giant, I don't even know, kite behind him.
Yeah, the octopus kite.
God,
yeah.
The visuals. And then when it gets sucked up into the blade, just wow, mind blowing.
The wobbly bobbly or whatever they call it. Yeah.
I just have to say, going back to it, and we didn't say it in the spoiler free section, but what I loved about Fury Road is I still to this day, you're like, how did they make this freaking movie? Like, how did they do this? And this movie has just as many moments like that. Where you're like, movies are cool. How did they pull that off? Did they really fly a dude in with the kite behind him, or is there CG involved? I don't know. Either way, very powerful visuals. Well, hey, Laron, anything else you want to add about the trade-offs we see between like the shorter action story?
I feel like the trade-off here is that we do get a little bit more time with the characters than we do in Fury Road.
Definitely.
We definitely get a little bit more time with different landscapes that we didn't see before, so the different factions that exist in the wasteland. So I appreciated those detours. There's so many car references that you make in real life that actually, like, she blazed a trail for the other women, but literally she did. So yeah, I think that those are kind of the trade-offs, is you get a little bit more intimacy with the world that you don't have in the other one, because it is pretty much like, let's hit the ground running. And so here, but I do say, like, it's not really an exchange of spectacle. You still get the spectacle. And so it's very much like you're going to get what you liked in Fury Road. It's just that there's more pieces to it this time, And I think that's fine. I think it just if you rework it and not think about it as just a straightforward chase film, then it's still a really good action film. So
yeah, I just think you trade off the adrenaline rush a little bit. Although the movie does have moments like that, but the again, I really feel like for me, like I said at the top, this movie is where I feel like I finally wrap my head around exactly what is Mad Max as a mythological character. Yeah, he's got an origin story the first movie, but in every movie he's talked about as this dude who just sort of shows up. And this is what the world that George Miller has envisioned looks like. And what does that look like when you think about it in terms of like myth, as we've already talked about? And it's just such an interesting, almost like Greeks, it's such a cool way to realize story, which you don't quite get in Fury Road, because it just feels like a really badass action movie. This is like, it's a badass action story happening within the context of this weird world full of larger than life heroes and heroines that are rooted in the environment and rooted in capitalism and are rooted in toxic masculinity and all the things.
Whereas like Fury Road, just kind of like the ideas are under the surface, and you can think about it and massage those ideas on the way home. This one kind of like extrapolates, like takes the ideas and fleshes them out.
Think about that. He spends more time with them,
makes them more tangible. So yeah.
All right, gentlemen. Well, we have talked for quite a while about Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. I haven't talked about that title. It's not very good. But otherwise, anything else you guys want to add about the movie before we wrap up today?
Please go see it. We need those numbers up. So the other half of the world that didn't go watch it over Memorial Weekend, let's watch it this weekend.
Yeah, I want to see Mad Max: The Wasteland.
Yeah,
this needs to make.
Do not let Garfield win
$500 million.
Do not let Garfield rise to the top, please. Here.
Oh no.
Let me talk about this again at the end of the year on Good Trash when we talk about whatever won the domestic box office. Let me talk about this and not Deadpool and Wolverine.
Oh man, please see the movie. We want more movies like that. It's not just Mad Max, although it is largely Mad Max. It's also like, hey, what if we gave bold filmmakers a ton of money to make cool stuff? And this is a movie that's taken all sorts of risks, and by you not going means we're not gonna get as many of those. And I just don't take for granted that we get cool movies like this, because it's not always gonna be that way if we don't support them when they come around.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, gentlemen, it's been so much fun. Dalton, Stuart, where can listeners keep up with you and your work online?
I'm all over the damned internet at Dollywood Squares. You can find me on Instagram. I have a Substack now. I've got a couple.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Substack world.
Yeah, Dollywood Squares over there as well. And on Letterboxd, you have to drop the A to find me on Letterboxd because of character limits. But you can also, I think if you put in my government name on Letterboxd, I think that pulls me up too. So yeah, Dollywood Squares or Dalton Stewart, you'll find me. I'm over there doing stuff. If you want to hear my podcast, we're putting out episodes every Friday, the Good Trash genre cast. We're talking about the films you wouldn't discuss in a film studies course, but we try to bring that same level of analysis to stuff that is a little more off the beaten path for film studies, like Lisa Frankenstein we just covered,
nice.
Or Rumblefish we're getting ready to cover. That's my host pick this
Or
month. Babylon, which we did with you, a couple months ago. Go
Fun
check
time.
out our Meta May marathon. We talked about movies about
Oh, is
movies.
that why you rewatched it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we did
I
a
saw
Good
you
Trash
rewatched
episode,
it. I was
yeah.
like, why would he do that? And now it makes sense. Now it makes
So
sense.
go check out that episode with Caleb. It just dropped as we're recording this over Memorial Day weekend, so it's out now. Check that out. We had a great talk about it.
It was.
Puzzled over a movie that we like and are frustrated by.
Yes.
Talked about movies and all that good stuff. And we'll be covering Dead Center right alongside you. We'll be dropping that in the Good Trash genre cast feed. So check us out, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dead Center is upon us. Speaking of which, Dead Center head of Pride Programming, Laron Chapman.
Yes. You can follow my film column here on the Cinematropolis, Real Insights with Laron Chapman.
He also just published one. Well, actually, Omen, he did one on the first Omen, which we mentioned earlier. That's been out for a little while. He also just published one on I Saw the TV Glow, which is a film that we have not had time to talk about on this podcast, at least yet. But I think we all really want to talk about it at some point this year because it's a very special movie for a very small group of people that
Absolutely.
3 of them happen to be sitting at this table.
Movie of the year. Movie of the year. You heard it here first. I also have a piece about it. So I gotta go read your piece.
Yeah?
I just published one.
Okay.
Yeah, mine's super short, so I'm ready to read somebody.
Same. Mine's pretty short too.
Okay, that makes me feel. I kept looking at it. I was like, I could spend another 2 weeks on this and like really buff it out. And I was just like, I gotta get this out. I gotta get
That's
it
the
out.
thing about writing, man. You just gotta get it out, get those thoughts out there.
Yeah, it's like you can't just wait your whole life to bust out the longer version, the more thought out version of it. Sometimes you got to get what you've got.
When we get jobs at the New York Times and we get to our full page spread, I'll go
when the
into it.
thriving industry of film criticism can pay people to write longer articles about reviews,
When David Sims and I do combat for the job at the Atlantic. Yeah.
Oh, he's gonna fight for that one to the death.
No, I think no kidding.
Well, yes. So all sorts of great things, real insights with Laron Chapman. You can find me, of course, over at thecinematropolis.com, covering Dead Center along with a great team of writers. Again, all of that over at Cinematropolis. Episodes coming in this feed. I'm also, for all the new movie releases, Letterboxd, C Masters Talk, that's letter C Masters Talk, also on Instagram at the same channels. You can always email us at thecinematropolis@gmail.com if you have questions, thoughts, or feedback, or maybe you want to win a free pass to Dead Center before this contest is over. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We'll catch you again next time when we return with our special Dead Center 2024 coverage.